His meditations are interrupted only by the faint sound of the conquered bell. A melody, as it were, imported into the wilderness. At a distance over the woods, the sound acquires a certain vibratory hum, as if the pine needles in the horizon were the strings of a harp which it swept. A vibration of the universal lyre. Just as the intervening atmosphere makes a distant ridge of earth, interesting to the eyes by the azure tint it imparts. He grew in those seasons like corn in the night. Wrapped in reverie on the walden shore, amidst the snow-marked pines and hickories in undisturbed
Good morning and welcome to our Sunday service. My name is Sarah Lenzi and I'm the minister at the Unitarian Society of Ridgewood. A sincere thank you, as always, to our team that helps create our Sunday services. You'll see their names there. For over a century, the Unitarian Society of Ridgewood has been gathering in community. This home for liberal faith and free thinking has held generations of seekers on their journeys, helped generations of Unitarians, Universalists, and UUs to deepen their understanding of themselves, of this world, and of their role in it. Here in this community, we celebrate each person, whatever their gender, sexual orientation, age, education, history, race, ethnicity, economic status. We celebrate and embrace you on your spiritual journey. Unitarian Universalism doesn't teach any one thing about God or the afterlife. We are a faith based on shared promises and a commitment to community. We do inherit some core values from our ancestors, of course. We share a belief in the interdependent unity of all existence of which we are a part. We share a belief that people can create a heaven on earth, that with determination and effort, we can build a better world. And we believe that we owe it to each other and to ourselves to do everything we can to make that dream a reality, seeking ever after justice, freedom, mercy, equality, and compassion for all, with love as our guide. If this is your first time visiting one of our Sunday services, we are so glad you found us this morning, and welcome. If you'd like to learn more about us, about Unitarian Universalism, or just get connected to our online communications, please fill out the Google form that's going to be dropped into the chat. The link will be in the chat. Or you can email our office at 113cottage@gmail.com or visit our website, uuridgewood.org. Email is, of course, our primary means of communication right now. So if for any reason you're not getting the daily Zoom room schedule or the weekly e-blast, please do let us know so we can make sure you're connected. I do have a quick announcement. We are currently conducting a survey to help us gauge what might feel like exciting opportunities for folks this fall in terms of programming. So please fill it out. There has been and will be a link in the e-blast, and I think a link is going into the chat now as well. Please fill this out so we'll know what you're interested in participating in with us over the next few months. Thank you for being with us this morning.
Please join us in the words for lighting our chalice. They can be found on your screen. We light this chalice for the light of truth, the warmth of love, and the energy of action as we gather together in the circle of community.
And now please take a deep breath. We come into our time together. Time for you to be still. Time for you to listen. Time to share, time to sing. Time to be with ourselves and with our community. Time to remember what matters most. So take a deep breath and be here, present, now, with all you bring to our time together this morning. Whatever is on your heart or mind, you are welcome here. Breathe and hear me say this. Hear it in your heart and mind, deep in your belly, in your soul. You are welcome here. You are loved here. Breathe into these truths and listen. For many years, the Reverend Ken Patton was minister of the Unitarian Society of Ridgewood. Many of his words are contained within our archives, many others in collections of his writings, and still more in our hymnal. We don't have lectionaries or books of common prayer in Unitarian Universalism. We do have hymnals that contain music and writing that, at least at the time of the hymnals compilation, folks deemed relevant and vital for our Sunday services. One of those writings by Ken Patton is titled "This House," and it's a beautiful piece. Our theme this month is home. I've been thinking a lot about houses and homes, what makes a physical space a home rather than simply a place to live, and what makes a community feel like home. Because this time is calling us all to spend more time in our physical spaces than maybe we are used to, and more time among the people that share those spaces. Are these homes? What makes them so? And so this morning, I offer you Reverend Patton's words, and I invite you to begin considering what those words mean. House, home. He writes, "This house is for the ingathering of nature and human nature. It is a house of friendships, a haven in trouble, an open room for the encouragement of our struggle. It is a house of freedom, guarding the dignity and worth of every person. It offers a platform for the free voice, for declaring both in times of security and danger, the full and undivided conflict of opinion. It is a house of truth-seeking, where scientists can encourage devotion to their quest, where mystics can abide in a community of searchers. It is a house of art, adorning its celebrations with melodies and handiworks. It is a house of prophecy, outrunning times past and times present in visions of growth and progress. This house is a cradle for our dreams, the workshop of our common endeavor. I take Patton's words to heart when I say to you, this community is your home. You are wanted here, needed here, loved here. Welcome home.
Good morning. This morning, we are sharing an abridged version of the picture book, Only Passing Through, the story of Sojourner Truth by Anne Rockwell, illustrated by R. Gregory Christie. We will share it in 3 parts today. Strangers stared while the auctioneer poked and pointed at the girl with his stick, showing how tall and strong she was. He promised that since she was only about 9 years old and already so tall, she'd soon be able to do the work of any man. The girl's owner had died, and his property, which included a few slaves, was being auctioned off to pay his debts. Her mother and father weren't being sold, for they were old and sick. No one would want them. They'd been set free to look after themselves. Young, tall, and strong as she was, no one bid for the enslaved girl called Isabella at that auction in Kingston, New York in 1806. The sun settled low in the sky, and still she wasn't sold. Finally, the auctioneer offered to throw in a flock of sheep if someone would just buy the girl so he could call it a day and go home to supper. And then a farmer did just that. She didn't understand a word for her new owner. He spoke English and she spoke Dutch, as nearly everyone living along the Hudson River did in those days. He whipped her when she didn't understand what she'd been ordered to do. Isabella earned her first words of English with scars that remained all her life. After 2 years, she was sold to a Dutch-speaking man who owned a tavern down by the river. She eavesdropped on the rough boatmen and sleigh drivers who came there to eat and drink, and she paid careful attention to their words, memorizing new ones every day. When she turned 13, a neighboring farmer offered the tavern keeper a good price for her. Isabella's new owner was English-speaking, but by now she spoke and understood his language. By the time she was 16, Isabella was 6 feet tall and could do the work of any man. She was old enough to have children who'd be enslaved to Dumont. So her master gave her to one of his other slaves, an older man named Thomas, to be his wife. Isabella wouldn't have chosen Thomas for a husband had she been given a choice. But enslaved people didn't have a choice in such matters. She and Thomas had 4 daughters and a son. Every night, Isabella prayed Dumont wouldn't sell them to an owner who lived far away, as had happened to her brother and sister. Isabella's mother never told the story without breaking down in sobs. Her parents never stopped grieving their lost children, and their pain became Isabella's own. Sometimes she wondered what it would be like not to have to dread such things. When Isabella was alone, she looked to the stars. For what was there, her mother had told her, God lived. God, who looks out for the long-lost children, wherever they were, and Isabella too. She often talked to God and believed she heard him answer. Sometimes she'd ask if a day would ever come when she would be free. One day an answer came, not from God, but from John Dumont. In 1825, when Isabella was 28 years old, Dumont told her that he decided to he decided to reward her for her hard work by freeing her in a year. She didn't know his offer was as generous as it sounded. In fact, he was required to set her free in 2 years. Slavery was gradually ending in New York. A state law had been passed in 1817, decreeing that most adult slaves were to be set free on the 4th of July, 1827. Dumont knew that, but Isabella didn't. From the day he made his promise, Isabella thought of nothing but her coming freedom day. She had a beautiful singing voice and sang out with joy every morning, for each day that passed brought the great day nearer. But then Isabella cut her right hand on a scythe and couldn't work in the fields. When her dreamed of Freedom Day finally came, Dumont said that since she hadn't done enough work for him in the past year, he figured she owed him another year's worth of work. She spent the next few days spinning every last bit of wool that had been sheared from Dumont's sheep. She planned to leave no work undone. She'd leave no reason her children could be punished in her place. Isabella didn't sleep at all the night she finished spinning. Before the sun rose, she walked away from the farm, taking for herself the freedom Dumont had promised her. A few miles away lived a couple named Isaac and Maria Van Wagener. Isabella had heard that they believed it was immoral to own slaves. She asked if she could board with them and work for wages wherever she could, and the Van Wageners said, oh yes. Dumont came looking for her. When he demanded that Isabella come back to the farm with him, Isaac Van Wagener knew the law was on Dumont's side. He acted quickly, offering to buy her for $20. Dumont pocketed the money and left. As soon as he was gone, Isaac told Isabella he'd bought her only so Dumont couldn't take her back. He knew that Isabella would have been cruelly punished for running away. So he'd bought her, even though he knew no human being had the right to own another. Now he was setting her free. Isabella wept with joy. Her dreamed of Freedom Day had come. It was a few days late, but it had come.
Please join us in singing our hymn, Wake Now My Senses. Wake now my senses and hear the earth call. Feel the deep power of being in all. Keep with the web of creation your vow, giving grace
It may have been from Isaac or Maria that Isabella first heard Bible stories. She was deeply moved by them, especially the one about Moses leading his people out of bondage in Egypt. Isabella saw how tragic things that had happened to people could be turned into stories that gave strength and inspiration to others. She began to believe that strong words had a power as great as any master's whip. The Van Wagener farm wasn't far from Dumont's, so Isabella was able to visit her children. One day, she discovered that her 5-year-old son, Peter, was gone. What she'd long dreaded had happened. Dumont had sold Peter. The man who bought him then sold the child to a plantation owner in Alabama. It was against the law in New York to sell a slave out of state. The man who had sold the little boy knew that, but figured he could get away with it. After all, who was going to stop him? But he didn't know that the Van Wageners had been teaching Isabella, and she knew that what Peter's new master had done was illegal. She made up her mind to go to court and have her child brought back to New York where he belonged. She found a lawyer who agreed to help her. As she stepped into the courtroom to plead her case, Isabella felt a strange new sensation. Later, she told people that she felt the power of a nation swelling with her that day in the courthouse. She won. People for miles around spoke of little else but how a former slave had taken a white man to court and won. No one had ever heard of such a thing. Slaves didn't do such things. Women didn't do such things. But Isabella did. Peter was ordered back from Alabama and placed in his mother's care. Isabella found his back covered with wounds too much like her own. In 1829, she went to New York City. There, she hoped to make enough money to send Peter to school. She'd heard of a school there that Black children could attend. She'd seen what words written down in books could do. Words in law books had set her and Peter free. Words in the Bible had touched the deepest places in her soul. Even though she couldn't read and write herself, she wanted to be sure Peter learned how. Peter went to school. Then when he was about 18, he took a job as a sailor on a whaling ship. In 1843, Isabella woke from a vivid dream. A voice had told her she must leave New York. It said she was meant to travel around the country, telling of her time in bondage, telling people what it meant to be enslaved. She had to be a voice for all the silent, still in bondage. It was a powerful call. Isabella was sure it was God telling her to do this. She had only 25 cents, which she put in her apron pocket. She tied her few possessions together into a pillowcase, closed the door behind her, and began walking toward the rising sun. As she walked, memories of her life found words, and one was Sojourner. Isabella knew it meant someone who was only passing through, staying a while, then moving on to another place. She now believed that she was meant to be a sojourner, always moving on to spread her message, and she knew she'd never serve any master but the truth. Isabella became a new woman that day. It was as though the life she'd known up till then belonged to someone else. A new one was beginning. The old life had become a tale to tell, a story to bring freedom to others. Her old name belonged to her old life. From that day on, she was never called Isabella again. Her name was Sojourner Truth.
So while I knew Sojourner Truth was born enslaved in the town that I live in, West Hurley, formerly known as Swartzkill, I did not realize the historical landmark case that made history in 1827 in the county courthouse of Kingston, 5 miles from my home. Here you can see both the courthouse today and the courthouse as it appeared in 1827. While walking through Kingston last year, I passed this county courthouse and read the bronze placard that adorned the front lawn. As the story tells us, Sojourner Truth's son Peter was abducted and unlawfully sold to a white family in Alabama. In 1828, she filed a lawsuit seeking his freedom and was the first person of color nationwide to win a court case challenging a slave owner. It is said that she walked several miles a day back and forth to the courthouse through the lengthy trial. In this picture of a map, today we see that there is this map that portrays an annual event in the Hudson Valley that reenacts her 11-mile flight by foot in 1826 from bondage to freedom. Today, if you walk across the walkway over the Hudson, which you can access, quick ride up the New York State Thruway, you will come to a recently erected statue of Sojourner Truth. I believe that Sojourner Truth stands as a testimony to her determination and fierceness of spirit.
Good morning. My name is Robert Markowitz, and I'm a member of the Board of Trustees. Each time we gather for our services, we ask for an offering to support the work of this congregation. As all of us are keenly aware, a lot of things have changed in the world around us. But one thing that hasn't changed is the love and support this congregation provides. If anything, our congregation has grown stronger because of the wonderful work that's been done to keep us connected through Zoom services every Sunday, like we're experiencing today, and also through our daily check-ins. But beyond our time and our talent, it also takes money to keep USR going. We are truly grateful for the way you have shown up and continue to show up with your hearts and minds open, with your helping hands ready, and with your generous offerings, ensuring that the mission and work of this congregation can continue. We know that in this moment, there are among us those who are unable to financially support the congregation and instead find themselves in need of support. If that is you, please let us help. Reach out to Reverend Sarah, the office, the caring teams, or any member of the board, including myself. On your screen, you will see some different ways you can make your offering. If you are a member or friend with us on Realm, you can give there. Otherwise, you can visit our website and use our Donate Now button. Also, you can text UU Ridgewood Plate along with the dollar amount you would like to give to 73256. Or you can mail a check to our office. In all cases, you can indicate that this is for the offering. Please give generously so that we can continue to care for one another and keep USR safe and secure, not just for ourselves, but for all the generations that will come after. The offering will now be given and gratefully received.
My teacher said us boys should write about some great men. So I thought last night and thought about heroes and men that had done great things. And then I got to thinking about my pa. He ain't a hero or anything but he can ride the wildest horse and find minnows near the master by the creek, and he can swim in fish we catch by nights. not so great. Men George Washington and Lee, but Dad's got a movie heart, seems to me.
Each Sunday, we make special time to turn our thoughts and hearts to the cares of the world and of our community. We do this by taking some time in deep breathing, in the communal speaking of concerns and hopes, and in the sharing of the very real stuff of our own lives. Before we settle into our time, I will invite you to share in the chat any personally significant joys or sorrows you wish spoken aloud to this gathered community. A reminder to please only share things that are yours to share, or that you have received explicit permission from another to share in this space in this way. Please use the chat now only for that sharing. I've been thinking, as we have moved to this way of bringing our community closer together by sharing the truths of our living, that often it is hard for people to hear joys and sorrows back to back. To move from the death of a beloved family member to the celebration of a graduation can feel jarring. And yet this is how our lives are, isn't it? We live each day with ups and downs, joys and sorrows come to us side by side. The second part of our story, detailing how Isabella gained her freedom but without her children, is an extreme example of how our human living often holds these things all together at the same time. It isn't easy, but learning how to be present to both our griefs and our rejoicing is so important. When we share together, commingling our joys and sorrows, we acknowledge the reality of each other's lives. We bear witness to each other in ways so vital for creating support and community. So we will continue to share in this way, joy followed by sorrow, tears followed by laughter. And we do so knowing that this space and this community can hold all that we bring to share. I invite you now to take a deep breath. Breathe as slowly and evenly as you can. Breathe in through your nose, and then breathe out through your mouth. Try to relax your body and keep breathing deeply. Begin at your toes. Wiggle them or curl them tight as you breathe in. And as you breathe out, let them relax. As you breathe, imagine that the air entering your lungs is suffusing your legs, relaxing each muscle as you go. Breathing slowly in and slowly out, letting your lower body relax. Breathe deeply through your nose into your belly, and then exhale slowly from your mouth. Feel your hips, your belly relax. Breathe deeply into your chest. Feel it expand, and breathe out slowly, rolling your shoulders back. In your imagination, as you breathe, let the air reach into your arms, down to your fingertips. Wiggle them and then release them. Feel the muscles in your arms relax. Let the muscles in your back ease. Breathe in deeply and slowly, and breathe out. Imagine the air filling your head. Unclench your jaw, let your tongue fall from the roof of your mouth to rest. Breathe out slowly. Our bodies need time to be quiet, not in sleep, but in mindful repose, in still attention. So often we have to relearn how to breathe deeply, how to come to rest in our physical forms. It doesn't happen through force of will. It comes from letting go, not of determination or attention, but letting go of force, of control. Breathe deeply. All day, every day, our bodies help us carry so much. The state of the world. In our shoulders, our guts, in our tense and ready fight or flight bodies, we carry this. But we can let it go for a while and breathe. Breathe deeply in and slowly out. We also carry love and care. The strength of family and friends, the power of community, the joy of memories and hopes for the future. In our hearts and in our minds, in our bodies that know what it is to hold and be held. We can lean into those gifts with gratitude. Breathe deeply in and slowly exhale. As we mourn and celebrate in community, keep on breathing deeply. Remembering the love and care your muscles, your spirit, your being remembers. Today we acknowledge the anniversary 2 days ago of September 11th, a day that changed the lives of so many around the world and shaped the future for us all. We mourn the lives lost that day here on this soil and the many more lives lost around the world in all the years that followed. We acknowledge too the ongoing heartbreaking loss of life from COVID-19 here in this nation and around the world. Too many losses that could have been prevented, too many losses taken in stride as if it were inevitable. We weep and we grieve. And we acknowledge the unceasing threats and damage from the wildfires and other natural disasters around this country that destroy property and take lives. Our sorrow grows with each image of a sky colored wrong, each tree flattened by winds, each street flooded. Take a deep breath in and slowly exhale. For all the joys and sorrows, spoken and unspoken, we offer our shared grieving and our mutual celebration. Each day, may we find time to breathe deeply and let our bodies find rest. Each day, may we remember to offer gratitude for the love and care that fills our lives. And each day, may we remember that with our stillness, our determination, our compassion, and our action, we can help to make sure this world leans toward joy and wonder, love and celebration. So may it be.
And so our story picks up. Wherever Sojourner went, she worked in fields, cleaned houses, did laundry, and told her story to whoever would listen. She made her way to Northampton, Massachusetts. There she found a community of abolitionists, people who wanted slavery to be made illegal everywhere in the United States. They invited Sojourner to stay and work with them. They noticed how vivid and powerful her images were, how passionate her convictions were. Her great height and plain old-fashioned clothes made for a striking and dramatic presence. Her new friends thought many more people should hear her message. They printed posters advertising a free lecture, a first-hand account of what life as a slave was like. They nailed them to trees and fences, then pitched a huge tent at the base of a hill. They hoped people would come from all around to hear Sojourner Truth speak, and they hoped that at least a few people would leave knowing that slavery was wrong. On the evening of the gathering, many people did come, too many. Among the mostly curious or compassionate crowd was a gang of young men who'd been drinking whiskey. They carried sticks and shouted that Black people were inferior to white. They'd obviously come looking for a fight and soon threatened to burn down the tent full of people. It was dangerous for Sojourner to be seen, let alone heard, as long as those men were there. She was the very target they were looking for. She hid behind the tent, and her friends told her to stay there until the constable came to arrest the men. Sojourner sat, huddled in darkness, waiting for the shouting and fighting to stop. As she sat, shaking with terror, she felt ashamed as well. She wasn't being true to her calling. She couldn't stay hidden like that. She had to find the courage to say what needed to be said. No one noticed her walking up the hill. As soon as she reached the top, Sojourner began to sing. A big white ball of a moon shone behind her, silhouetting her tall, straight figure. Her voice carried down to where people swarmed, still fighting. The gang of men ran up the hill, but she went on singing. When they came close to her, swinging their sticks, she paused in her song, gazed steadily at them, then asked why they wanted to hurt her, for she had never hurt them. To her amazement, they threw down their sticks and promised not to hurt her if she'd only sing some more. So she sang. Finally, she paused and spoke patiently but firmly, as she would to small children. She said she'd sing one more song, but then they must pay attention to what she'd come to tell them. And when she was done speaking, they must go home without any more fighting or arguing. The tough men who'd come to pick a fight that night promised to do what she asked. Sojourner Truth found strong words for the message she had to deliver. She stood tall and dignified while she told many terrible truths about slavery. But Sojourner also told of the triumphs of taking freedom for herself, of using the law to bring her son back. As she spoke, she felt the power her words had and knew she'd never be afraid to speak before a crowd again. She made people listen. She made people understand. So when Sojourner Truth finally asked, "Is this any way to treat a human being?" people knew the answer was no. She wandered for many years, a tall, dark figure in plain gray clothes, wearing a white cap on her head. She'd stop for a while, say what needed saying, then move on. She was a sojourner, only passing through. When people threatened to burn down the place where she planned to speak, she vowed angrily that she'd still be heard, speaking from the ashes. Wherever she went, she carried a white silk banner with the words, "Proclaim Liberty," embroidered on it. People listened and thought about what they had heard. They told others what Sojourner Truth had said. and her message spread throughout our land.
And so if you need to leave, we completely understand. And as always, the service will be recorded and posted online, but we will continue this morning. So if you can stay with us, that would be wonderful. I took a modern architecture class in college. I loved the teacher. E.J. Johnson was his name. He was an excellent lecturer. And we hit on all the things that you might imagine: Mies van der Rohe, Le Corbusier, Bauhaus, Frank Lloyd Wright, so many, many more. I loved this class not only for the entertaining lectures, but for the theories and the architecture itself. The 20th century was filled with all sorts of explorations. The pushing of materials and what they could do with curving walls and skyscrapers that defied gravity and curious buildings shaped like anything but a building. Ducks is what they call that last group. Robert Venturi coined the term. There's an office building in the shape of a basket, for example, and a building out on Long Island in the shape of a giant duck. The 20th century is filled with wonderful and wacky architectural things. Architects were experimenting and thinking about what space really meant. What relationship did the outside have with the inside? And what did the form convey about the structure? What did the form do to those who worked or lived or passed through that structure? I continued to study architectural history as a graduate student, focusing, though, on religious medieval architecture and the art that helped define it. But my questions were the same. What is the relationship between experience, belief, and the structures we humans create? I've been thinking a lot about these questions now as our interior spaces, or lack of them, become so much more integral to our daily living. I don't think I've ever spent this much time inside my apartment. And I was remembering the other day, the final project for that modern architecture class. We had to design a building and then actually build a model out of foam core. Mine was an apartment building along a river that was surrounded by woods. You had to consider the location of your thing, not just the building itself. On the side that faced the woods, the facade was designed to look like a stereotypical house. Roof, gables, windows with shutters, shingles, unassuming, just a short apartment building echoing generations of New England home-style American architecture. But on the side that faced the river, it was glass and steel and formed the letters HOME, traced in red, green, yellow, and blue. The point was a home in the form of the word home. One side sensible and expected, the other modern with clean lines, proclaiming this glass and steel thing to be what you might not expect when looking at it, and proclaiming it regardless of what actually went on inside. The project was exactly an exploration of my engagement with the question I raised at the beginning of this service. What makes a structure more than just a physical structure? What makes it a home? And more broadly, does a home have to be a place? I kept the model for some time, probably because those same questions never left me, though now it's gone. I tried to find a picture, but I could not rustle one up. But I thought of that project this week because our theme for this month is home. And it's a peculiar one, perhaps, given that we can't be in our shared physical space right now. So often we think of our shared congregational buildings as our congregational home. And when I say those words, welcome home, we're together in that space. At the point in my life that I created the project, I had known my childhood home, my camp home, and then my college home. They were homes by definition, but I hadn't really yet learned what it meant to find a home with other people. Meaning, I hadn't yet had friendships I had chosen, whose solidity and closeness made me feel at home wherever I was, as long as they were in my life. I hadn't yet experienced that with a community either. I hadn't found a place that felt entirely comfortable, where I could just be me. I hadn't learned in a visceral way that home is in many ways a portable concept. To be clear, housing is a human necessity, and our inability to resolve the housing crisis in our nation is criminal. I'm not talking about the basic human right of housing today, though goodness knows there's plenty to say about that. I'm talking about what makes us feel whole and comfortable and cared for and solid in the world. I'm talking about the feeling we get when we know we have somewhere to turn. We have a community that welcomes us. And our home, it isn't always a house. Our congregational home isn't our congregational buildings at 113 Cottage. That's the premise we're starting from this month. That although we might love to be back together in person, and although we might love 113 and be excited to see the new chairs and the new paint and the familiar wood sculpture and our chalice and the beloved stained glass windows, we do in fact have a home beyond those buildings, without them even. A colleague adjacent to the wildfires out west wrote that they had walked a congregant through picking up the chalice and a handful of other items from the congregational building, just in case the fires came through and destroyed their building. I thought about that, about the pain that kind of loss would create, and it's real. It's very, very real, and goodness knows I hope that congregation doesn't face it. But I also know that if it should, the people of that congregational community would still have a home with each other, among each other, in each other's presence. It isn't the physical space. It's the way we are with each other, what we promise each other, what we mean to each other, the values we hold in common and the commitments we make to certain behaviors. Those are what make a house a home. And so for the next 3 weeks, this is what we're talking about: values that make a house a home, or said another way, values that make a congregation a community. There are some that we think of all the time, right? Love, kindness, compassion, generosity. These things help create a sense of home. In fact, without them, home is generally not possible. But there are 3, and I'm sure many more, that we sometimes overlook, and those are the ones that we're going to talk about this September: determination, adaptability, and forgiveness. And today it's determination. We shared in 3 parts this morning the story of Sojourner Truth. The version we read to you is a slightly abridged version of the picture book written by Anne Rockwell based on research into Truth's life, including from the autobiography Sojourner Truth dictated to Olive Gilbert. Truth's own narrative of Sojourner Truth tells much of her story, and the publishing of that autobiography helped to support Truth through the end of her life. But Truth lived a long time and had a long career of speaking even after she dictated her story. Rockwell acknowledges that the part she chooses to tell ends early. Rockwell says, quote, "I've told her story only up to when her transformation took place, for that part of the story moves me the most. But there is more to tell of Sojourner Truth's life. On her long journey, she crossed paths with many of the great people of her time: Abraham Lincoln, Frederick Douglass, Lucretia Mott." Rockwell is so right. Sojourner Truth's wandering and speaking and teaching took her all over. She spoke against slavery, and when the Civil War ended, she spoke about the injustice that was sure to follow because there was no plan for how to change the world so that folks who had been enslaved would have opportunities and safety and full freedom. She participated in a White House-driven task force to help formerly enslaved people find jobs. She rode a whites-only streetcar in DC and then fought a legal battle over it in court and won the right to ride. She spoke out against misogyny, asking for rights for women. She met women's rights activists of the time, including Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony. She lectured at a women's rights conference in Akron, Ohio, which is where she gave her most famous speech, "Ain't I a Woman?" Truth wanted to set right the world she had been born into, one of injustice and evil. She was determined, first to be free and then to become a voice for those who were not. It's no wonder there are statues and monuments to her, including one in Central Park that shows her, Cady Stanton, and Anthony. You should go check it out sometime. When Jeannie reminded me of her story, we agreed that she seemed a perfect example of determination, resolve, resoluteness, firmness of purpose. Her life had more than its share of sorrow and struggle, but her resolve was strong. Her sense of calling and purpose was strong. I wouldn't dare to say she was unshaken or unflappable. She was human. But her story is one of perseverance, of being undeterred in the face of challenge and change. She heard a call to speak truth and justice, inspired by the words of ancient stories, and she gave herself a new name, one of her own choosing that represented who she really was. She heard a call to wander the nation, to proclaim the truth, and she did just that. She kept an eye on her larger goal, her broader calling, and she did what was necessary to achieve it. She had a boldness, a courage, and a clear determination. I realize in many ways the story of Sojourner Truth's life teaches us the power of determination for creating justice. It teaches the importance of having that fire in the belly that leads us to change our lives completely in order to make the world right. But I truly believe that determination, not just to make the world better, but to choose a path for oneself, to focus on the larger goals and to work toward them, is a necessary component in making a group of people a community. Here at USR, a lot of our determination does feed our justice work, but it also feeds the very existence of our community. We make decisions together and as individuals about what this community is, who we want to be. And we have a level of self-determination unlike many other denominations. We name ourselves, we govern ourselves, we fund ourselves, we determine for ourselves the values we will hold. And then the level of determination we exhibit doing those helps define us further, because determination helps build or break trust. Determination is about commitment and strength of purpose. If we say we're going to work on racial justice as a community, whether or not we do it is a measure of our trustworthiness. If we proclaim ourselves a community that embraces the ideals of environmental justice, how we pursue that becomes a measure of our trustworthiness and our commitment. We, Unitarian Universalists in general, and here at USR, are determined to be welcoming and compassionate. We are determined to work for justice and make this world better. We are determined to support and love each other, not just for an hour or two each Sunday, but every day. It's these goals that make us not just a loose collection of like-minded folks, but an actual community. It makes us a home. Imagine if we were just a bunch of people who sometimes showed up, sometimes didn't, made no commitments to each other, and just kind of hung out for a little bit on occasion. It might serve a purpose in our lives, but it wouldn't be a community. It wouldn't be a home for us. A community makes plans, envisions a future, commits to each other explicitly or implicitly, and gives and takes and shares so that those goals can be reached. A community works through challenges without giving up and finds a way forward together. I think about this a lot. In our new member ceremony, we acknowledge that inevitably this community might let us down or disappoint us. Maybe it's something as simple as you voice a dislike of a particular hymn, but we keep singing it anyway. Or maybe it's something as heartrending as deep unkindness from a fellow member of the community. It happens. We're people. But it's what we do when that happens that matters. Do we walk away? Do we stop supporting the community with our time or money? Do we stay committed and in relationship, doing our part to further the future we envisioned together? Are we determined to build this community together or not? Determination is the piece that keeps folks engaged in their communities, even when they don't agree with the leadership, even when they've experienced offense, even when they are disappointed and heartbroken. Trust exists because we don't just leave at the first signs of trouble. I was blown away by the determination on display last spring when the pandemic began. Determination from your leadership to continue offering high quality services and programming. Determination that this abrupt and world altering moment would take as small a toll on our community as humanly possible. Determination to keep the community together despite physical distance. And you all have kept it together. Your resolve that this community thrive is exactly what I'm talking about. That commitment and strength of purpose makes it possible for all of us to trust in this community, trust in this home. We can make an analogy to our nation. We vote, we stay engaged, even or especially when we don't agree with leadership. Staying engaged is an act of determination and trust. We protest or praise, we voice our needs and concerns, our disappointments and visions, and we work hard for the future we envision. We vote. Vote in November. I'm going to say that probably every Sunday between now and November. Vote. But determination is what builds a future and creates community. We can also make an analogy to our relationships with family and friends. We make honest and real efforts to work things through, even when things are hard. When my mom gets frustrated because I like to put the dishes in the sink, but then it makes it hard to wash them and load them, she doesn't just move out. We resolved to create a family community in a particular way, and each time we work through little frustrations or hurts, it deepens trust and it builds relationship. Determination can be misplaced. There are times when relationships or communities do not deserve our determination. There are certain things beyond the pale that deserve outright mutiny or departure. And determination has a shadow side, the one that says, I will do this thing or create this world or achieve this goal no matter what, no matter who gets hurt or who is left behind. All qualities have a shadow side. But assuming a baseline of safety and respect, when that quality of resolve is applied properly with attention and flexibility to the work of justice and love and care among people determined to create a shared world and determined to speak the truth, well, then that quality becomes vital for building trust and furthering the work. Determination, well placed and tempered by adaptability, builds trust and builds community, pushes forward the work of creation and brings about justice and love. Sojourner Truth had a clear and decisive calling toward justice. Her life stands as an example of what determination looks like. Truth was called by her own deepest heart, by the voice of her God, by the times she lived in, to take a new name, to wander and to teach, to be at home in the world, not in one place, and to try to change the world. And so I leave you this morning with questions inspired by Truth's story. Who are you determined to be? What resolutions have you made and what do you pursue with determination? How are you determined to build community? What are you called to and where does that calling come from? Where are you at home in this world? And how can you use your determination to create home for others? As you find your path, hearing your call and stepping into your future, may you remember that this will always be your home. So may it be.
Please join us in our closing hymn, Down the Ages We Have Trod. The words will be on your screen. Down the ages we have trod, many paths in search of God, seeking ever to define the eternal and divine. Some have is for some the hallowed ground, and these paths they upward climb, teaching us that love is God. Though the truth we can't perceive, is at least we must believe. What we take most earnestly is our loving deity. Our true God we there shall find, in what claims our heart and mind, and our hidden thoughts enshrine, but which for us is divine. Please join us in the words for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish the flame, but may the light of truth, the warmth of love, and the energy of action burn bright in our hearts until we are together again.
Thank you for being with us this morning.